And thank you so much for joining us. We're doing a deep dive into CISA 2023 year in review. So real quickly, my name is Lauren Verno. I'm going to be your moderator for the day because these three people, they are so knowledgeable that they could talk forever. So someone's got to keep them to about an hour. But again, my name is Lauren Verno, and I want to go ahead and introduce you to who you'll be listening to today. Probably already know them. So Ben Finke, he is the CTO of OnDefend. Kirby Wedekind, he is with CISA, and then Paul Magnusson with the FBI. Let's start with you, Ben. Quick introductions of who you are and kind of what role you'll be playing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ben Finke. I'm the CTO of OnDefend, one of the co-founders here. I support all of our technical testing teams. I'm also the product owner for BlindSpot. I will be the grateful outsider today, talking about how the CISA products and the report that we're about to talk about has helped me and helped us as we work with our customers, try to make things more secure.
Kirby?
Great. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Kirby Wedekind. I'm a security advisor with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. My role this morning is to share some insight into how we arrived at the CISA year in review for 2023 and what we can expect for 2024. My mission space spans physical security, cybersecurity, supply chain security, resilience, and anything else that might be tangentially related. So we've got a lot of great information to talk about, everything from nation state actors down to criminal groups and everything in between. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Paul?
Good morning, everyone. Paul Magnusson with the FBI. I'm a supervisory special agent out here. I manage several programs. I'm just here to help support and answer any questions that may venture toward the FBI or questions of what we do and how we can help and facilitate and our working relationship with CISA and private sector.
Yeah, and I do want to mention we are going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions, so you can go ahead, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A section. We'll try to get to them, and if we don't get to them, I promise I will try to get you an answer and send them to you because there is a lot to cover. So I think let's just get the ball rolling. So really, again, what we're doing here, 2023 year in review, CISA just put it out, what was it, 2 weeks ago now? And it's just an overview of the year. And Ben, you might be good to start here with a quick little overview of what we're going to be talking about today and what was in the report.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next slide, please, Lauren.
Oh, is it not going for you?
Nope.
Oh, no, we have already run into our first technical difficulty. What are you guys seeing right now?
The cover slide.
Interesting. Well, we are sure going to go ahead and try to do this. While we're doing it, I'm going to try to reshare. So really quickly, you guys, based off of what you know, can you guys go ahead and see this now?
Yeah, that looks good. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so the 2023 year in review from CISA was comprehensive to say the least. There is so much cool stuff in here. A lot of stuff we're not going to get to talk about today. One of them, things like how to prevent people from building bombs, which fascinating. Not my area of expertise. I'm glad people are thinking about it, though. We're going to talk about, or try to get to these 8 topics here. The target-rich initiative that CISA has, some secure by design, a bunch of other things. But I think you'll see as we go through here, there's a lot that's happening. First of all, CISA is only 5 years old. I didn't really realize that until I read that, because it feels like, and this I say this with all love and respect, like it feels like you guys have been here forever. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's not me like, oh my gosh, they've been here forever. No, it's been really good. I'm amazed at how much stuff has come out. And I really appreciate the partnership with you guys so we can talk about this today. I think it's evident in the work that there's been a lot of opportunity to engage and like actually see if this stuff works in the real world, not just people sitting around a conference room like, that sounds great, let's go with that. So Lauren, I think we should hit to the next one, the target rich initiative, please. Okay, so I'll start off on this one. The target rich initiative, and I know Kirby has a lot he wants to say about this. I'm going to comment on the first part. It covers 3 sort of industries. I'm going to talk about K through 12 education, but there's 2 more here that I know Kirby wants to spend some time on. But this is a statistic, and as a person who spends all of their time thinking about ransomware, kind of too much actually, I was shocked to see this statistic that 80% of K through 12 organizations have had a ransomware event, like in the past year. So if you lined up 5 principles of a K through 12 institution, 4 of them have had a problem with ransomware. 4? That seems insane to me. There's only so much. These are institutions that have obviously budget constraints. If you had to design an environment with like more people clicking things they didn't know about, you probably couldn't do worse than a K through 12 institution, right? But we need to teach these kids. We need to have them leverage technology in their day-to-day. One of the things I love that CISA does is provide the opportunity and materials to do things like tabletop exercises. A lot of people get scared off by like, that feels like there's a lot of information we don't have to be able to put that together. And so on the website, you can go download this, and this screenshot on the right here is the template, the Word template that even says, put your name here and use this, right? It's like exactly walks you through how to do one of those. And even if you don't do anything else, just going through and having a plan that people have practiced at least once, big help. Kirby, I know you wanted to talk some more about some of the other things on this slide.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. And you're right. The Target Rich Initiative focuses on 2 sectors and a subsector. So the 2 sectors that Ben didn't talk about, healthcare and public health, and water and wastewater. These 2 are CISA's top 2 out of our top 4 priorities for infrastructure security in 2024. And they have been actually for several years. We know that water and wastewater systems across the country are being targeted by a number of different adversaries, and exploits have happened and are happening. Healthcare institutions, hospitals, and even supporting institutions and companies are among the #1 targets for our adversaries as well in the use of ransomware. And then, of course, K through 12 educational institutes. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, why would a criminal ransomware group target a K through 12 school, an elementary school, or a public hospital, or a municipally owned water system? And the answer is probably multifaceted, but we can definitely say that these groups are looking for those institutions that are less protected and maybe don't have the resources or the skill to protect themselves. So imagine, and we're here in Jacksonville, Florida, in the St. Johns River. Imagine you've got a bull shark that swam in from the Atlantic Ocean and it's in this brackish water, just biting at everything that's in its way, trying to find something to eat. That is the metaphor that I use to wrap my mind around why somebody would target these various institutions. And so Ben's right. One of the best things that these groups can do, a low and no cost solution, as we like to talk it, is take advantage of some of the things that we offer public facing. The CISA tabletop exercise packages are a great way to have a guided and focused discussion with folks who need to understand the gravity of the situation. Not protecting ourselves in the year 2024 is just, it's not something that we can do. Conventional wisdom used to be that one should pick and choose the battles that they fight. We don't have that luxury when our adversaries are trying to exploit our kids' schools, our healthcare institutions, the water that we drink, and probably one of the unsung heroes of critical infrastructure is wastewater. Imagine a situation in which toilets stop flushing and water stops going out from where we expect it to happen. Things come to a standstill very quickly when the wastewater system stops working. Things have to go away from where they come from. And without getting into too many of the details, just imagine that as you're looking around, what would happen if the infrastructure that I rely on a daily basis stops? Of course, the energy sector is always top of mind, and the electric grid in the United States being a target. There's plenty of information out there from nation states, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, top 4, from CISA, from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, that really get into the details and actually provide profiles on the advanced persistent threat actors that are targeting these things. Earlier this week, there was a release, interagency release from the Bureau, CISA, and I think some of our international partners about Volt Typhoon, which is a Chinese-sponsored APT that's using living off the land techniques. They are repurposing or using dual-use technology, software that has a legitimate business purpose and is supposed to be on somebody's network, and they're using it to exploit that network. Not necessarily to turn things off yet, but they're using it to gain a foothold in the event that maybe another conflict kicks off and China finds an open spot to invade Taiwan. And rather than allowing us to project our national power overseas, they try to disrupt us here locally in the United States. And so we're too focused on our own, fixing our own things that have broken, to really respond in the way that we intend to, if and when that altercation happens. So looking at it from a big picture, global strategy, national power, ability to project power from the United States military and others, all of this is related. And I know that it's a far way to go from, say, a middle school and a water treatment plant and a hospital to, well, now China's invading Taiwan, but everything is related to everything. And that's never more true than it is with cybersecurity.
That's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
No, that's great.
No, it's great. It's all absolutely great. And I mean, obviously, I think I'd like to bring this up really quickly is just we heard, we're going to move on, but I mean, yesterday, the 1 billion mark for ransomware. I think that's why, we're past millions. We know it's billion at a minimum. So I think that's why it's so important to have these conversations. I think, should we go to the next slide?
Sure.
But yeah,
Okay.
Ben, you want to kick this one off?
Absolutely. So Secure by Design is a major CISA initiative. I'm a big fan of a lot of the stuff that's inside of this document. And it comes about because we see stories like this all the time where we see software that we intend to buy that makes our organizations or our personal lives like has a function. And a lot of these cases, we intend to be the secure barrier between us and the rest of the internet turned out to be the gateway and not such a secure barrier as they are. We're going to talk more about Log4j later as well, but you can see that it's prevalent in a lot of different, not just commercial situations. And so if you can go to the next slide, Lauren. There are a few things. Secure by Design is a great document that you should read if you haven't already. It's not that long. It's got a lot of really great points in there. I'm going to talk about a couple of them before I turn this over to Kirby and Paul. So this isn't a phrase used inside the Secure by Design document. I think I've lifted this from a podcast someplace else, so I apologize for misattribution there. But the idea of default settings should be secure as opposed to like the bare, like enables the thing to run, but in like the least secure manner, because we know most people don't bother changing the default settings, right? So they spend a lot of time talking about default settings and why hardening guides don't work. A lot of reasons why. Everybody's well-intentioned, but they just don't work. So we shouldn't rely on those. I think that's really, really valuable. Something that my friend Paul on the call here is very adamant about and agrees with me is that security features like logging shouldn't be a premium, right? Single sign-on, all those things. Paul is very tired, and I will speak for him, of responding to events where they don't have security logs because that wasn't part of the SKU of the SaaS model you picked. So please turn on logging so my friend Paul can have that access so we can go catch those bad guys when and if you need his help. And something we spend a lot of time thinking about when we do application security testing with customers is a concept of something called a memory safe language. So there's all kinds of vulnerabilities that exist in software. Most of it just because of the way that the software languages themselves handle the way that like memory is utilized, whether it's like a variable or pointers or all these other things. And it turns out if you use a language like Rust, it takes care of all those problems for you, and you basically don't have those vulnerabilities, and we can worry about other things. If you use, though, software like Java or C or something like that that can have those, you have to follow really rigorous coding practices to not inadvertently include those. So the idea is like, if we just use a memory safe language to begin with, we can, fix these problems. And I will say the Linux kernel already starting to use that. A lot of it is being written in Rust. A lot of Microsoft is doing the same things with the core of the Windows platforms being rewritten in Rust. So there are other folks already thinking about this if you aren't. But Paul, I'll turn it over to you before we let Kirby, because I know Kirby wants to cook on this one. Talk a little bit about, we were talking about the security features that should be premium, because most people think about the prevention, but the containment and then like the understanding afterwards tends to be lacking.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the prevention. I mean, you hit a lot of good points. Everything that I would agree with, and you're right. You mentioned the login. I agree. We've responded before where people do not have those types of features already set in place. But part of the after effect of if you have a problem, one of the things that we had discussed before was an issue of forensics and how you're actually documenting the problems that you're having. I've found that a lot of companies have not thought of the forensics aspect of things. And that's one thing that every team should have, either somebody on site or at least a company that you're working with to deal with forensics. You can't move forward with an investigation and what you need, determining what you did or what the vulnerability was, if you're not able to actually forensically look at it. The additional thing is sometimes as you're building your response, if you're not keeping the idea of forensics in mind, if you go back toward and you look toward, you're going to either do a prosecution of maybe an employee that was laxed, or maybe even a vendor that didn't design things properly and got them into your network. If you don't forensically acquire these images and the data that you may need to actually testify or move forward toward legal counsel, you're looking at problems. So one thing that you should definitely keep in mind is that aspect.
Kirby, go for it, man.
Thanks, Ben. I just want to jump in here with the secure by design, and I really appreciate the emphasis that we're giving this today. There's three principles that really undermine or underlie security by design. The first is take ownership of security outcomes for customers. This is shifting the burden of security from the customers back to the software manufacturer. Secure by design is kind of a radical approach, and we're really shifting the paradigm in a lot of ways. And it seems for many years, companies create software. The business model is to produce software that works, that serves a singular purpose. That purpose, for the most part, is not typically security minded, or it hasn't been in the past. And so it's been this sense of caveat emptor, buyer beware. You can use the software, you can open source it, you can do whatever you like, but something bad happens, that's on you. You need to train your people and take accountability for that end user. Secure by design flips the paradigm, and it says, you created this software, you are responsible for the security outcomes. One corollary of that is that CVEs, as they're published, must be correct, accurate, and provided quickly enough so where they're still timely, relevant, and actionable. And that is a major part of secure by design. Part of that, and you can't release a CVE that's good, that works, unless you've adopted a principle of radical transparency and collaboration and accountability. So those two things really go hand in hand of who is responsible for what. Is everything the responsibility of the end user, or does the manufacturer actually bear some of that burden throughout the life cycle of that software? The last piece is something that I think is probably the most radical aspect of secure by design. And this is make secure by design a business decision and a priority. And so, heretofore, it had been the technical experts taking the product and all of the technical details and trying to translate it in a way that the C-suite or the executives can understand, and taking technical information and trying to put it in terms that a non-technical person, who is the actual decision maker, can understand it enough to where you can generate buy-in. That responsibility has been on the technical people for probably too long. And secure by design says, let's switch it around. Let's put the onus on those executives. They're making the decision. They need to have a better understanding of that technical information. Technical people have a massive role in this. And it's not to say that it's been a failure on those people who have designed and created so many wonderful programs, things that have changed our entire way of life in the past 20 years, the past 30 years. But really, we've borne too much of the burden. And so a C-suite, a board, needs to take ownership of those decisions, meaning they need to understand the risk in more depth than saying, okay, that's fine, let's go ahead and do that. It needs to be a business decision throughout the entire life cycle. So those three principles really are the foundation of secure by design, and they are interdependent upon one another.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right there, is how do you get the buy-in from executives when you're talking about such technical, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to explain that. All right, so let's talk about preventing harm before it occurs. I mean, listen, we love Paul, but you don't necessarily want to see Paul knocking on your door after an event. So we try to do prevention. Ben.
Yeah. So I have, unfortunately, two very bad statistics on the prevention side. The first you can see here, these are both, by the way, from an IBM report in 2023. Only 1 in 3 organizations that experiences a breach will actually detect it themselves. The other 2 out of 3, somebody like Paul is knocking on your door and letting you know that you've had a problem, right? Which is obviously too late to do anything about it. We also see this time to identify and time to contain number not really shifting in our favor. So these are in days, these really scary numbers. So 204 days was the average in 2023 of how long it took an organization to identify they'd had a breach, not to like fix the problem, like figure it out. And then it took an additional 73 days to contain that event. We measure most attackers, like their attack path through the environment in hours. So we've got a long way to go to fix this problem. And so what I liked about this section of the report, talking about a lot of the work that CISA does, you can go to the next slide, Lauren, specifically on trying to get out there and help work on some of this prevention. So you can see here, there's a lot of entities that they have essentially notified of vulnerabilities and vulnerable things ahead of time, so that they can hopefully not have these groups fall victim to whatever attackers using things. Some of these are related to publicly exploitable systems like the MOVEit file transfer system software that was experiencing a lot of problems a lot of federal agencies had installed. As you can see here, this is something that CISA does a great job of notifying, and that you can sign up for as well, right? CISA drops a lot of this great information in your inbox or other places that may be useful for you. Kirby, do you want to add anything about some of these preventing harm before it occurs services?
Yeah, absolutely. This is really where CISA finds itself doing most of our work. We like to stay left of boom on the preparedness side of incidents. So mitigation, prevention, protection. One of the things that my colleagues, our cybersecurity advisors, have spent a tremendous amount of time doing in the past 12 months, maybe even a little bit longer, are pre-ransomware incident notifications. And so this is what the term that we use to describe the process of, from whatever source, whatever ways and means that are available to our technical experts that work in SCIFs, deep, dark, down inside, underneath mountains. They find out that a company, an entity, a state or local government agency, a K-12 school, a wastewater system, a hospital might have ransomware existing on its network, or there's been a compromise. And the ransomware typically at this stage of the notification hasn't actually deployed yet. It just exists in the network like a ticking time bomb. And so my friends, my colleagues, our cybersecurity advisors get these notifications and they say, we need to call the Acme, box company and let them know that there's ransomware on their network. And we may or may not have an existing partnership with that company. Imagine a situation where you get a task to call a company, call a CISO, call an IT director that you've never met and say, I'm Kirby from CISA, you've got ransomware on your network. The immediate response will be one of two things, either some unpleasant words or just a hang up and the end of that conversation. And so part of the work that I do is outreach to ensure that we have partners across our areas where we work. And hopefully the idea is that we have direct partnerships and that we're collaborating and communicating and sharing information in a real way. And if not, maybe we know somebody who knows somebody so that we can get in touch, because we know time is of the essence. The longer that a compromise persists or ransomware exists on somebody's network, the more likely it is that a bad thing is going to happen, that ransomware is actually going to deploy and encrypt data and exfiltrate data or whatever the case might be. So we really do our best to notify folks ahead of time. One of the best ways to establish a relationship with CISA is to sign up for our vulnerability scanning service. And I know that a lot of folks on this call have already done so, which I'm thrilled about. And really what that does is ensure that your organization, your company has a long-standing relationship with us. We have a direct line of communication so that when my really smart friends get really bad news, they have contact information to reach out and notify you all that it might be a bad day. So that's the plug for that vulnerability scanning service. If you're interested, I'm more than happy to connect you with our vulnerability management team. It is, of course, no cost, a government service. It is protected and it is entirely voluntary. So no regulatory requirement or authority whatsoever. It's completely up to you all.
Yeah, and I think just to add another plug, because Paul, I'll give it to you at the end as well. There's plenty of resources also from the FBI side that you guys can offer, because that is the whole point of these calls. Real quickly before I go to Paul, Kirby, take a step back for 5 seconds. Can you let's take healthcare, for instance, that 154 number. What exactly does that mean?
Right. So that's 154 different healthcare systems that have been notified. And it could be an individual hospital. It could be an outpatient facility. It could be an old folks home. The healthcare and public health sector is actually very large. And so if you're having trouble sleeping at night, there's a 1,000-page document called the Infrastructure Taxonomy that breaks down essentially everything that you can put your hands on in this country into 16 sectors, 54 subsectors, and then segments and subsegments beyond that. And so 154, imagine an entire healthcare system being notified. And so that's how many of those. And we all recognize that many healthcare systems have more than one hospital and multiple facilities and multiple lines of effort that are all interrelated underneath one single business umbrella.
And I mean, Paul and Kirby, this is both for you. I mean, 154, I mean, that's a lot. Like if you think about 365 days a year, how many, that's, you know, almost one every other day. But
right.
Those numbers are actually probably low compared to what is probably out there.
Yeah, typically, and I think we can say that with most of the numbers that we see, because there's no mandatory reporting requirement across the country from the federal level yet, even though the law has been passed. The rules aren't in effect. So we have an unclear and imperfect picture of the victim landscape. And that's probably something that will persist regardless of what requirements are set in place. Paul, sorry, over to you.
No, I agree completely. And one thing that I wanted to add is whether you're communicating with either the FBI or CISA through Kirby or somebody here in our Jacksonville office, it's all about relationships and the information that we have. And if we have relationships established, let's say you're a healthcare provider, you know, from the FBI side, we do receive several notifications at certain different levels. Some stuff that we can share publicly that we can just print off and share. Some stuff that is at a classified level where if you have somebody in your organization that still has a security clearance or has a security clearance, we can have them come into the facility and it's a need to know, we can share that information with them. But unless we have those relationships set in place, we may see something come across our desk that we feel we want to share. We're not quite sure exactly who to share it with. So again, relationships are important. Either you go through Kirby, you go through the FBI Jacksonville office, but as long as you have a point of contact, and then we have a point of contact as well. We have a private sector coordinator as well, Vanessa Stelly. I think most of you probably know who she is. She'll also tie you in with, if you have some kind of a threat or a complaint, she'll tie you in with whatever squad investigates that certain violation. But that's the one thing that I would like to stress as well, is that the relationships need to be established.
Yeah, I mean, get these numbers as accurate as possible, because we all know it's likely much higher. So this is one of my favorite slides, Ben, better baseline for cybersecurity. I know Ben personally picked all these pictures out, and I am a big fan.
Cyber hygiene is one of those terms that, like, I know other people use, and I know it means something, but to me, this is one of the ones that I'm hoping we leave in 2023. But what is important to know is what we're talking about here really is better baselines. If you can go to the next slide, Lauren. So one of the things that CISA has produced is something called the Cybersecurity Performance Goals, or CPGs. What's cool about them is that they do a couple of things. First of all, they're aligned with the standard framework you're probably already using in your security program anyway. So it's not like you're departing from that or using one that's like unsupported and unrelated to like other compliance things you may have. But what's cool is it's got lots of recommended practices that are sort of like risk ranked in terms of like how they help like reduce and prepare things. Because it's also NIST CSF, it does the whole like identify, prepare, recover, respond, all the stuff that like my friend Paul was just talking about that we're going to have to be ready to do. And it does a thing that you can do in here that everybody asks about all the time, is like how you can benchmark yourself against, I guess, other companies in your area or companies in your industry or whatever, because it's got sort of maturity rankings in there that you can sort of go around and share. But what I wanted to highlight a little bit here before I ask Paul to step in is they're not shy about making these things available. They're out there. You can definitely download them and then like take advantage of them. CISA conducts a lot of like free webinars. Here's an example of like doing some LinkedIn live talks, which fun fact, I did not know LinkedIn did live talks until I saw this little ad thing here. So that's cool. But what I will say is one of the things that struck me in going through the CPGs is like, it really does a good job, especially on the recover side of things. And so if you are trying to figure out like the damage, the extent of it, to do meetings, maybe some like reporting requirements or some things like that, super important to have that capability. In addition to knowing like how you're going to set up a recovery, like a disaster recovery plan, and how you're going to test it and how you're going to make sure that it's functional. Paul, I know you can't be specific with like names and things, but when you respond to an incident going on with a customer, would you say that they have typically at the high end of preparation or the lower end?
Typically, I would say, unfortunately, it is more the lower end,
Yeah.
unless we've responded to them in the past. Typically, the first time we respond is on the lower end, and then things have tightened up. And unfortunately, I don't want that to be the base standard that in order for you, in your organization to kind of ask for security and get the blessing to move forward, that you have to have an event. But unfortunately, that seems to be the pattern in this industry, that it's not taken serious until there's an event and the fear of a larger event happening. But to answer your question, typically the first response is they're kind of at a loss. They have not really prepared, and some of the questions that we're asking, as we understand that if it's, and hopefully the phone call comes right at the onset of the event when they realize there's a problem. So we do understand that the first priority is for them to get back online, try to make things whole. So we'll step aside, but as we're trying to gather information to help them, to share information, maybe we have some information related to, if we can identify the threat actor, maybe we can find that the threat actor is being worked by either our office or maybe another office. We can maybe share some information that will help them. But in asking that initial information, can you give us some logs or something along those lines, some IOCs that you've identified? Sometimes we found that we have to sit back and wait, and that is problematic for them, and it's puts us in a position where we'd love to help more, but without information, we can't scrub our holdings and see if there's stuff out there that we can share with them.
Paul, you've mentioned a couple times, and this is super important, I think, like notifying law enforcement so that you can get that response started. I don't think we've, what is the right way for somebody, like, so if the company is having an event today, even if they know you, do they just call you on your phone? Do they send you a text? How do they notify officially?
So officially, I mean, honestly, officially, you can call me. If you have my contact information, I've been in the division for just up to 6 years. So if you already have my contact information, give me a call. If it's a violation that my team's working or a problem my team's working, then we'll address it directly. If not, then I'll get you in touch with the supervisor that is overseeing that particular violation, whether it be possibly a counterterrorism, counterintelligence, a cyber matter. I'll align you up with the team that deals with that, and then I'll continue to help out in any way that I can. If it's another division, you just call the main office, whichever the division that is for the main office. So there's a Tampa, in Florida, there's a main office in Tampa, Orlando, and then there's also Miami. Jacksonville itself has the upper 47 counties of Florida. So if you just reach out to us. The other thing too is you should probably set up a relationship with your local law enforcement as well. So if you pick up the phone and call 911, you should have that established. You should your local law enforcement should have an idea of who they usually have like a community liaison officer. You should establish that relationship as well. And then we will work with local law enforcement depending on the type of violation or the type of threat that you're looking at. I know we're talking about cyber related threats, but sometimes these can venture into other things as well. So to have those relationships in place, just a go-to is what I would suggest.
And that's true for like an active intrusion. What about like a business email compromise situation? Still call the main number of the field office?
You can call the main number of the field office, or again, I'm here to help out. I'm with the government. I'm here to help. You can contact me directly and I'll get you in touch. You can call the main office as well, depending on the severity of, say, the business email compromise, which was your example. Some of the local agencies deal with those as well. We do have, we've talked about it before, we do have our certain thresholds that we have to meet, and it has to be, unfortunately, it has to be a much larger case for us sometimes to work when it comes to that type of a violation. But we do like to be notified of it, and we can give you direction and help as well. We've stopped stuff before, kind of drop what we were doing just to help out an immediate victim in our area. And if we can do that, I mean, even just getting somebody back 50 or 100,000 from a business email compromise, or if it's a business that is dealing with something like that, and this is just the onside of it, we can maybe give some advice. But whether we run the full investigation or we turn it over to another division, if it seems to be run out of that division, or if we just turn it over to a local law enforcement. The first step is at least the phone call to get some direction.
Awesome.
Great advice. That is for sure. I think let's talk a little bit about secure, resilient OSS. I know that you have a fun little slide there, Ben.
Yeah, so this is something that I'm really passionate about, is securing open source software. So a stat and then a comic. So the first thing is that 96% of applications have at least one open source component. Even if your organization doesn't build any software, you have this problem, you just don't know it. Also, the thing I like is this XKCD commercial or comic here about like all this crazy stuff that's built, and it's all built, like the underpinnings is like this one open source project that somebody's been maintaining, without being paid, just for the love of it, since 2003. I could think of like the curl project, for example, probably exists in a lot of things, and that it would very easily be this little piece down here. If you could go to the next slide, please, Lauren. So CISA has a roadmap on open source security that I think is well worth your time to read. It has a lot of things in there about being able to support the OSS communities. I mean, the reality is that most open source software is done by people who are just like literally love doing it. And so they put it out there in the world, people use it, they're excited that people are using the software. And so it just continues to go that way. Sometimes these people are employed by companies that support that behavior, but frequently it doesn't, right? Which means that if your day job gets busy, you don't really have a ton of time to spend, patching issues and flaws and things that might show up in a library you gave away for free. And so making sure that we have, supported communities, whether that means we have some kind of a model where they can be supported and compensated for the time they spend on there, right? Especially if we're getting value out of it. I think they're also understanding the prevalence of open source software. Until you actually start tracking and pulling back the layers on things, you don't realize how many even commercial applications leverage some component. It's just so tempting. You just look at, you're like, oh, I need the ability to have comments on this web page. And like, you can either spend a bunch of time, build that yourself, or you turn around and you look like, hey, look right there in the language and framework we're building in, somebody already did it. Let's just use it. And now you have no idea. Now you have an open source project right in the middle of your software product. So most commercial tools that you buy, especially, and this is the wild stat, is that a lot of like security appliances you buy, almost all open source under the hood. Like there's a good deal of like proprietary custom developed stuff, but frequently it's stitching together other open source tooling you may not know. We dropped this slide earlier that had the Log4j problem. If you are a network defender who was operational in the 2021 holiday timeframe, you absolutely remember this because it ruined your holiday break, most likely, where all of a sudden we realized like this Log4j library that seemingly everything written in Java had, or something, what was in there. And now we had to figure out like, how do we fix the apps that we control? How do we fix the ones we don't? What gets really kind of crazy about this is sometimes you'll bring in an open source component and realize itself has other open source products. And you've just kind of in one move, like just moved all of that stuff onto your table that you get to deal with now. Obviously, CISA is very worried about risk to government systems. The good news is that the same risk that they're worried about is a risk that the rest of us should be worried about too. So we kind of all benefit from what they're trying to lay out here. They spend some time in here, and I'm gonna go on a little soapbox about software bill of materials, or SBOMs. So this is the idea that like every single component that goes in your app gets cataloged and included, so that if you want to know if a vulnerability that CISA releases, like, hey, Log4j is vulnerable, you can like look down this list very quickly and know yes or no, right? I'm sure all of us on here have had customer questionnaires come in from vendors or partners of ours that have said, do you use this software, right, when it's being exploited? If we had SBOMs published and included as part of like delivering software and delivering services, they wouldn't need to ask, they would know because it would all be listed there. SBOMs are increasingly becoming an artifact of any type of testing. So the fact that an organization in the very near future, maybe even today, wouldn't be able to produce an SBOM almost instantly probably means they don't do a lot of security testing. So you can use that guidance for free if you'd like. But it talks a lot about the secure usage of OSS. It really is not that long of a document, really great read. A lot of problems here that we're trying to fix. And I think this one in particular is one that we're going to make some good headway on in 2024. I'm really hopeful for that. There's a lot of things that are moving that are making it so that you can have like the places that support open source software, mainly like GitHub, offer free security testing to open source projects. So there's like levels of testing that before you would never have paid for, as hosting an open source project now is included in free. And so we're going to start getting some of those benefits, other things that CISA is doing. Kirby or Paul, open it up to you guys if you guys have anything you want to add about this. But I remember consuming this document when it came out, and I'm still a big fan. I still point people to it all the time.
Just two quick things, Ben. I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate your enthusiasm about this. This is fantastic. The first is that this goes back to the principles of secure by design, radical transparency and accountability. And this is it in action. The SBOM is fantastic. The corollary product that we released to the SBOM and to the OSS security roadmap is actually a hardware bill of materials too. Talking about asset accountability, we know that some of our adversaries exploit supply chains and where hardware is actually manufactured so that it's modified, that it might not do exactly what we think it is supposed to do. So there's additional products out there, the hardware bill of materials, the software bill of materials, all public facing. And last point on this slide is that one thing that CISA has tried to do, or at least we've done, and I don't know that we actually ever said that we were trying to do this, is to share as much information as we possibly can. And it is always amazing to me how much information is at the unclassified level that is available to all of us, not just guidance and thought leadership about these grand ideas, but actually useful information, the indicators of compromise, how to do this. In addition to the best practices we talked about a couple of slides ago, we have a bad practices list. So if you were having trouble getting your executives to take ownership or generate buy-in, if you're at that phase, and you have a bad practice that you've identified, it's on our list, you can show them that it's not just your view on the world. This is CISA saying that this is good and this is bad, and this is how you fix it. The only thing that we can't get to is hands-on keyboard, but everything short of that, we fully recognize that we have an obligation to share as much information with as many people as we possibly can who care to hear about it. And I guess last point, I promise, thank you all for taking the time to join to hear us talk about all this stuff today. Fully recognizing that you have day jobs to attend to. It means a lot that you care so much about this subject and what you're doing and your passionate professionalism to learn more and share with us today. Thank you. Sorry, Ben, back over to you.
We got just about 18 minutes left, so I definitely want to make sure that everyone is throwing their comments, questions, concerns, praises into the chat box for sure. So anything before we move on from this?
Yeah, we knew this was going to happen, Lauren.
I know,
Let's roll.
and I love you all so much. And listen, it really is so amazing to watch how much you guys are passionate about each of it. Ben could talk about SBOMs for days.
I probably
could.
That's true.
We're going to really quickly hit on AI. I will throw out this fun fact. I was reading recently, actually, a story that Chief AI Officer, the CAIO, it's like the start of any McDonald's, Ronald McDonald song, basically. That is actually becoming a thing. Mayo Clinic has already hired one. I know Mayo Clinic, and we've started to see it. I know the government under the Biden administration has already started to name some for the Department of Defense, all that good jazz. That is my soapbox on AI. To kick it off to you, Ben.
Thank you, Lauren. That is a good soapbox. Yeah, so AI is a thing, everybody. It's here whether we want it to or not. We may or may not be at the peak of inflated expectations in the hype chart. Next slide, please. What I will say, CISA has a really tough job with this one, but the roadmap document they've made for this is great. So we have to not only think about how we build like safe, and by safe I don't just mean like secure. I mean like from vulnerabilities. I mean like safe to operate. AI. I think when we say the word AI right now, I feel like most people are thinking of like a Chat GPT or something that, you ask it to like tell you a story and it can do that. That is definitely important. But I'm thinking about like all the AI that makes decisions, right? Like self-driving cars. There's all kinds of other AI that we're building, right? That uses all sorts of different things. And so we have to think about how we responsibly build AI and put some safeguards in place so that people, like humans, are safe, right? But then also bringing, and CISA definitely focuses on bringing AI in to support like the government mission and like expertise in the workforce. But of course, the other thing is like, how do we protect ourselves against malicious use of AI? There was a story just a few days ago about a person who was convinced to execute a financial transaction after being on a Zoom call that was everybody else but them was a deep fake of people they worked with, right? But it wasn't actually those people. And so you're increasingly going to get to the point where like a video call to confirm something won't really, you're going to have some other like code word or something, I guess, to make sure that you're actually talking to like Ben at OnDefend and not my avatar now that all this video content is out there. So it's going to be interesting to figure out how we do this. Paul, we were talking about this the other day, like trying to figure out how to do this. And in all seriousness, I made a joke about like my wife and I have like a code phrase now. So if she gets a call and it sounds like me and it says like, I'm in jail, I need money, she'll be like, what's the password basically? And I said it as, I said it as being funny, and Paul goes, "That's not funny. You should absolutely do that." So, Paul, I'll let you drop some wisdom on the folks here.
No, I agree with that. We've seen that as well. We had somebody in our own office that received that, and it's a terrifying phone call to receive, and it sounds as if that somebody's being kidnapped, and the question was, and you had brought it up, it's kind of a safe word, and that's kind of what we would suggest as well, is have a safe word with your family where you get those phone calls. And okay, well, what's the safe word? If it's not a safe word, you know that the situation isn't relevant. It's just a fictitious. We also talked. I've gotten a lot of questions on AI and how to help combat how is it going to be used against my organization. And I go back to the people and I tell them, well, I can't tell you how AI is going to be used against your network or your organization. You know your organization. You know what your vulnerabilities are, or you should know what they are. As example, if you're going to use AI for voice verification, but if you don't have voice verification within your organization for anything, then I wouldn't worry about AI for voice verification. So again, you really need to look back at your network as a whole, know what your vulnerabilities are, and then realize, do some research. How can AI possibly be used to compromise what could be a legitimate access to our network through multi-factor authentication or anything along those lines? That's what I've been telling people at this time, but it is a scary time right now.
I mean, I know, and this will be our last, I think AI will wrap this up, but I just read an article about 2 days ago that the administration is really making a push for, watermarks potentially on video and figuring it out. But the government kind of said, listen, this is going to be on the onus of a lot of these private companies to figure out how they're going to do that. So something to keep in mind for sure as we move forward in this interesting world. All right, Ben.
Yeah, let's go quick because we want to get to a couple other things. So good news, everybody. CISA is actively protecting some federal networks. Next slide, please. So I thought this slide was wild. So they provide active services for federal networks. And so it's informative about the way we might defend other networks. Kirby, 900 million malicious DNS requests blocked.
Absolutely. So CISA has 4 mission areas, and one that we probably talk about the least that might be the most important is our actual responsibility to protect and defend federal networks. So anything that ends in .gov that is a federal agency or department that's not law enforcement and it's not Department of Defense, we are charged with protecting that. I think it used to be OPM, Office of Personnel Management, or maybe GSA, General Services Administration, who formerly had that role. But since we have become an agency within the Department of Homeland Security, that is our responsibility. We are actual network defenders, in addition to providing support and guidance to private industry, state and local governments, academia, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, K-12 schools, everybody, every organization. That's why our agency is designed the way that it is. So the things that we are seeing, the attacks that we're defending against, the adversaries that we're countering, are guiding our principles and the information that we're sharing and how we are adapting and evolving to those threats and the things that we are doing and the things that we are seeing so that everybody else can decide for themselves, because that's the way that it works. We are responsible for the federal .gov. Everybody else has their own decisions to make because, as Paul often says, your network is your network, and most networks are entirely different, and there's different risk appetites and risk calculus that every organization goes through. So because we are defending the federal .gov, we want to make sure that those tools, the resources, the tactics, the strategies that we are using are articulated clearly and concisely so that others can use that to inform their own decision making.
Cool. Yep. All right, I think we should just go straight to the trends with 10 minutes left. So obviously taking a look back, we saw that trends for 2024. I don't think this is going to shock anyone.
Hopefully not. Definitely going to get more O days. I'm sorry. There's going to be a continuing stream of these. And by the way, to be pedantic for a moment, an O day or a 0 day indicates that we don't actually know that this vulnerability exists and no patch is available for it. If a patch is available for it, or we know the vulnerability exists, it is no longer an O day. It's just a vulnerability. And so we should call it that. But there are sometimes O days that show up. There's a lot that happened, like we talked about on some of the perimeter. CISA actually did something unprecedented in their 5-year history, which was it a week ago, maybe 10 days? They told all these government agencies that are using some of the Ivanti products that it's no longer time to consider like patch or mitigation. You just have to unplug it and take it off the line until we tell you about it, right? So those things are going to continue to happen. I think if your strategy for how you're going to like manage your environment doesn't include expecting to have to patch things in a very rapid fashion or do some kind of mitigation, then you're just going to set yourself up for a lot of fire drills without a lot of outcomes. And if these things keep happening, you'll get enough repeat visits from Paul. He'll keep stamping that punch card. Eventually, you'll get that free Sunday. But that's not really worth. Paul's a great guy to hang out with. You don't need to do have a full breach to have him come hang out with you. I think we're going to see some ransomware stuff continuing. It's unfortunately just too robust an ecosystem at this point for it to go away overnight. The other thing I will say on good news, though, and I guess this falls under compliance and regulation, is that we're starting to see some of the ability to sanction members of these things, even though they're outside of maybe the ability for us to go, or law enforcement to go actually arrest them. The fact that we can sort of like name and shame these groups. So the TrickBot group, a bunch of Russian nationals were named in 2023. Just recently, Australia did the same to a person behind the Medibank ransomware attack that was over there. And what I really enjoy about that one, reading about that, is apparently that guy's even a dirtbag, but he's considered a dirtbag by the other ransomware operators. So like if these scumbags think you're a dirtbag, just imagine what kind of a person this is actually out there. But I'm going to stop on compliance and regulation. Kirby, you had some really good points about some things that are coming up, including this SEC notification that might impact things here in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. So the SEC put into effect new 8K reporting requirements for cyber incidents. So if a company has a cyber incident and it is determined to be material or materiality, that organization is required to report that via the 8K process to the SEC. And I know that this was a big topic in 2023 because I think it was unveiled over the summer and went into effect about 6 months later, because it's difficult to say what materiality is when there's no guidance or barometer provided to determine what that is. So if it's a publicly traded company, anything that's going to make a stock price go up or down, it's incumbent upon those companies to determine for themselves what constitutes materiality. It's a really difficult situation to put folks in when we're trying to keep the country running. And really, federal civil servant here, I'm not the one that makes the trains run on time, to be quite frank with you all. And that's one of the things that I love about CISA, is that we work in support of industry, support of academia and state and local governments, fully recognizing that even though we're protecting the federal.gov, the country is much larger and much more complicated than that. It takes all of us. It's not just a whole of government approach, it's a whole of society approach. And I know that additional compliance and regulation is never anybody's favorite thing, but it serves a purpose. It helps us to understand what the threat landscape looks like. What are the TTPs that are being used? Is it new, novel, repurposed? What's happening? And so in addition to that, we also have the CIRCIA law that was passed. I believe it was part of the infrastructure bill that went through a couple of years ago. We're still in the rulemaking process for that. And what that means is that there are going to be additional federal requirements for reporting cyber incidents, including ransomware, specifically ransomware, and when ransomware payments are made. There's a term in that bill, covered entities, and part of the rulemaking process that we are going through right now, and this is not CISA in a vacuum, this is, again, a whole of society with industry, with large companies, with municipalities and state government agencies, to determine who should be covered. How do we do this? How do we do it in a way that is more beneficial than it is harmful, fully recognizing that there is going to be harm involved because it's going to take away people's time, attention, and we know that time is money when it comes to business. So we have to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right way so that there is a net gain for the United States, for everybody here, and those who we serve.
With about 5 minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and just do some final thoughts. Taking a look, we could talk about these trends for days. I mean, obviously, taking a look at these 6 different options. Kirby, Paul, Ben, which one sticks out to you the most that you're going to think is going to be probably the biggest trend of 2024? Kirby, we'll start with you.
I'll go first. I think supply chain. And because the long tail on it and the difficulty in identifying all of the different components from either hardware or software is really one of the things that is most concerning, especially because we know that there are nation states out there trying to Russia, North Korea, Iran, and we have profiles on those. Public-facing Office of Director of National Intelligence releases an annual threat report every year. If you haven't looked at it previously, you can take a look at the 2023 report. 2024 should be out soon. It is a great resource to understand who you're working against and how well resourced they are and what they're doing. So for me, it's supply chain.
Paul?
I think I'll agree with supply chain for the same reasons Kirby said, but I'll also add in social engineering. I think with the advancement of AI and the continued development of it, that's a fear that I have as well. I think we're going to see more of that as that's exploited.
Ben?
Paul took my answer, so I'm going to go with compliance and regulation. We've actually seen Microsoft, kudos to them, take advantage of this or at least follow these guidelines by they've had a filing for an event that happened maybe 2 weeks ago where a threat actor gained access to a credential in a test environment. It turned out that credential could give itself permissions that they use to then gain access to Microsoft employees' email inboxes. And they were very forthcoming about the event and gave like the full train of how this stuff went. So I think that that's going to be nothing but good, because if Microsoft's having trouble securing the Azure environment, the rest of us are definitely going to have trouble securing the Azure environment.
No. I do want to give you guys just a quick little spiel to be able to Paul, Kirby, specifically to you. If people have any questions, again, we didn't really have time for questions, but if you have any, please put them in the chat. I promise I will put them in front of the right people. But if people want to get in touch with you, Paul and Kirby, where should they go? How should they reach you?
I'll drop my contact information in the chat and happy to share it. I have a relatively unique name, so if you Google me, I think there's some presentations that I've done that have my contact information in it as well. Please shoot me a connection on LinkedIn. I'm happy to shoot you one if we connect offline. And as always, I am at your service, happy to help you find any resources that CISA might have or advise in any way. Paul?
Same thing. I'll drop mine in the chat. Kirby has my information. If you already have his, you can get it through me. Vice versa. If you're trying to reach Kirby, you can't, get a hold of me. You can also call the general FBI number here, the main office, and just ask for me as well.
Yeah. And on behalf of OnDefend, you can always follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. We have a ton of resources that we're consistently, Ben, if anybody needs a little bit more than maybe the free resources that Paul and Kirby and CISA, we're always happy to help, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to it. And appreciate the partnership, Kirby and Paul. This was a lot of fun. We got to do this again.
Absolutely. This is great. Thank you very much for hosting us, Lauren and Ben. This is great. And Paul, always great to spend time with you. And thank you to everybody for joining. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. And again, thanks for letting me be a part of this. OnDefend, thank you for hosting this. And if we can do anything for you, let us know.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye, y'all. Talk to you soon.